They say blood is thicker than water, but they never tell you what happens when the water is poisoned from the start. My son, my only child, David, smiled at me from across the polished mahogany table of the lawyer's office, and in that smile, I saw not the boy I raised, but the ghost of a man I never truly knew, a cold, calculating stranger. He thought I was just a frail old woman, lost in the fog of grief, my mind dulled by sorrow, easy to manipulate. He had no idea that the woman who raised him, who taught him to tie his shoes and read his first book, was also the one who taught his own father everything he knew about reading a lie in a man's eyes. My heart, a muscle that had weathered 68 years of joy and sorrow, now felt like a clenched fist, tight with a mixture of disbelief and a simmering rage. The air in that room, usually so sterile, felt thick with unspoken accusations, a metallic tang of betrayal that coated my tongue. I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above, a buzzing sound that seemed to amplify the tension, making my temples throb. Are you watching this with someone you trust? Take a moment to look at them. Really look at them. And if you've ever had that gut-wrenching feeling that something isn't right, that the ground beneath your feet is shifting, subscribe to my channel. You're going to want to see how this ends, because sometimes the monsters aren't under the bed. They're sitting across from you at the dinner table, wearing a smile that chills you to the bone. Let's go back 2 months, to a time when my world was still anchored, albeit precariously. My husband, Robert, passed away. He wasn't just my husband of 45 years, he was the bedrock of our family, a quiet giant whose presence filled every room he entered, even when he said nothing at all. He built a small real estate empire from nothing but sheer grit, an unwavering sense of integrity, and a handshake that was his bond. His funeral was a testament to his life, understated yet attended by everyone whose lives he'd touched. I saw the faces of the elderly tenants from his first apartment building, their eyes red-rimmed with genuine sorrow, and the city mayor, a man Robert had occasionally played chess with on Sunday afternoons, offering his condolences with a sincerity that spoke volumes. I stood there, a 68-year-old widow, Eleanor Vance, feeling the crushing weight of his absence in every sympathetic glance, every whispered word of comfort that felt like a dull ache. The scent of lilies and damp earth clung to my clothes, a constant, suffocating reminder of the finality of it all. My son, David, stood beside me, a perfect picture of the grieving son, his arm firmly around my shoulders, a comforting weight that now, in retrospect, felt like a subtle restraint, a performance. He delivered a eulogy that brought tears to everyone's eyes, speaking of a father-son bond that I knew, in my heart of hearts, was a carefully constructed fiction, a performance for the benefit of the mourners. His voice, usually so confident, had a tremor that day, a practiced vulnerability that fooled everyone but me. I remembered Robert telling me once, his eyes twinkling with a knowing glint, that David could sell ice to an Eskimo. I just never thought he'd try to sell me a lie, a carefully crafted narrative of devotion that masked a deeper, darker intent. The cold marble of the church, the hushed whispers, the scent of old wood and fading flowers, it all blended into a surreal tableau, a stage for a drama I was only beginning to understand. The days following the funeral were a blur of casseroles, condolences, and the suffocating weight of silence. Our grand Victorian home, once filled with Robert's booming laughter and the gentle clinking of my teacups, now echoed with my own solitary footsteps. David, however, was suddenly a constant presence. He'd arrive each morning, impeccably dressed, a concerned frown etched on his handsome face. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone," he'd insist, his voice smooth as silk. "Let me help you with everything." He'd take over the mail, sort through Robert's papers, and answer phone calls, always with a reassuring smile. I was grateful, or so I thought. My grief was a thick fog, clouding my judgment, making me crave any semblance of normalcy, any familiar hand to guide me. I remember one afternoon, the sun streaming through the stained glass window in Robert's study, casting colorful patterns on the antique rug. David sat across from me, a stack of documents in his hand. "Mom," he began, his voice gentle, "Dad's affairs are extensive. It's a lot for you to handle right now. The market is volatile, and there are so many decisions to make. What if we just simplify things? A power of attorney, for instance. It would allow me to manage the day-to-day, protect your interests, just until you're feeling more yourself. He pushed a document across the polished mahogany desk. My hand hovered over the pen. A tiny alarm bell, faint but persistent, rang in the back of my mind. Robert's words, "Trust your instincts," whispered in my ear. I hesitated. "David," I said, my voice raspy from disuse, "I appreciate your concern, but I think I can manage. Your father taught me well." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something cold in his eyes, quickly replaced by a look of understanding. "Of course, Mom. Whatever you think is best. I just want to make sure you're taken care of." He gathered the papers, his movements a little too quick, a little too precise. The air in the room seemed to cool, and I shivered, despite the warm sunlight. I hadn't seen much of David in the last 5 years, not since he married Amelia. They lived in another state, a bustling city filled with glass towers and endless opportunities, a world away from our quiet, tree-lined street, or so they said. Calls became shorter, visits less frequent, always accompanied by a litany of excuses that grew increasingly elaborate. Robert had been hurt by it, deeply. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped when David hung up, in the quiet sighs he'd let out when another holiday passed without them, in the way he'd stare out the window, lost in thought, a silent yearning in his eyes. He'd call, leave messages filled with fatherly concern, offer to fly them out, only to be met with polite, yet firm, excuses. "We're swamped with work, Dad," David would say, his voice distant, almost rehearsed, a practiced indifference that stung Robert more than any outright rejection. Amelia's project is in a critical phase. There was always a reason, always a new, pressing commitment that kept them away, a barrier of busyness they erected between us, a wall built of ambition and perceived necessity. After Robert's diagnosis, a fast-moving, aggressive cancer that gave him only 6 months, I thought that would change. I truly believed the gravity of the situation, the impending loss, would pull them back, that family would finally come first, that blood would indeed prove thicker than water. It didn't. They visited once for a weekend, a fleeting appearance that felt more like an obligation than a genuine desire. David seemed uncomfortable, his eyes constantly scanning the room as if looking for an escape, for the nearest exit. Amelia was glued to her phone, her fingers flying across the screen, barely acknowledging my presence, her attention firmly fixed on some unseen digital world, a world she deemed more important than a dying man. They left citing a prior commitment they couldn't break, a vague business meeting that felt infinitely more important than a dying father's last days. The air in the house felt colder after they left, a void that even Robert's fading warmth couldn't fill. I remember the metallic taste of disappointment in my mouth, a bitter pill I had to swallow alone, a silent scream trapped in my throat. The rustle of leaves outside, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, every sound seemed to mock the emptiness they left behind, amplifying my solitude. Robert and I raised David to be independent, to be strong, to carve his own path in the world, to stand on his own 2 feet, to be a man of principle. But we also raised him to be a good man, a man of his word, a man with a moral compass, guided by honesty and integrity. Robert, especially, taught him the value of integrity, of honesty, of hard work, of earning what you have, not taking shortcuts. "Your word is your bond, son," he'd say, his deep voice resonating with conviction, over and over, from the time David was a little boy learning to ride a bike, scraped knees and all, to the day he left for college, a confident young man with a world of possibilities before him. Without it, you have nothing. I watched my husband build his business on that very principle. He was tough but fair, a man whose handshake was as good as any signed contract, his reputation built on trust and unwavering ethical standards. He never cut corners, never engaged in shady dealings, and he never lied. He gave David every advantage, every opportunity to learn the business, hoping he'd one day take over the reins, to continue the legacy he had so painstakingly built, brick by brick, deal by deal, a testament to his vision. But David wasn't interested. He wanted to be a financial analyst, to work with numbers on a screen, to chase abstract gains, not with people on the street, building relationships brick by brick. Robert was disappointed, of course, a quiet sadness in his eyes that he tried to hide, a father's unspoken longing. But he supported him, paid for his prestigious MBA, and never once made him feel guilty for choosing a different path. He always believed in David, even when I had my doubts, even when a tiny, persistent voice in the back of my mind whispered warnings, little premonitions I couldn't quite grasp. I remember the faint scent of his pipe tobacco in his study, a comforting aroma that always signaled his presence, his wisdom, his steady hand. Now, even that memory felt tainted, a shadow falling over the warmth it once held. The scent of old books and leather, usually so comforting, now seemed to carry a hint of foreboding, a whisper of what was to come. When Robert was gone, truly gone, the silence in our big, empty house was deafening, a heavy blanket that smothered every sound, every thought, every memory, leaving me adrift in a sea of sorrow. The scent of his cologne still lingered in his closet, a cruel reminder of what I had lost, a phantom embrace that brought tears to my eyes. David insisted on staying for a few weeks to help me get my affairs in order. It felt strange, almost unsettling, like a predator circling its prey, his sudden attentiveness too sharp, too focused. He was suddenly so present, so attentive, a stark contrast to his years of absence, his sudden concern feeling forced, unnatural, a performance for an audience of one. He'd make me tea, a weak, lukewarm brew that tasted nothing like Robert's strong, comforting blends, sit with me for hours talking about his father, about memories I barely recognized, embellished and distorted, like a poorly photoshopped image, twisting the past to fit his narrative. He spoke of fishing trips they never took, of long, profound conversations about business strategy that never happened, weaving a tapestry of shared experiences that felt utterly foreign to me, a narrative he was constructing for his own benefit, to solidify his position. I was so lost in my own grief, so consumed by the raw ache of loss, that I just nodded along, letting his words wash over me, a comforting, albeit false, narrative. My mind, usually so sharp, felt sluggish, heavy with sorrow, clouded by the fog of bereavement, making it difficult to discern truth from fiction. He started asking questions about the business, about the properties, about Robert's investments, his voice casual, almost too casual, a thinly veiled curiosity that pricked at my subconscious. "I just want to understand Dad's legacy, Mom," he'd say, his eyes filled with a sincerity that felt almost rehearsed, a performance for an audience of one. "I want to make sure you're protected." The words were meant to reassure, but they stirred a faint unease within me, a tiny, insistent whisper of doubt, a discordant note in the symphony of my grief. The floorboards creaked under his weight as he moved through Robert's study, a sound that now seemed sinister, invasive, a violation of Robert's sacred space. The will reading was a week after the funeral, a somber affair held in the hushed office of Mr. Henderson, Robert's lawyer, a man I'd known for 30 years, his face now lined with age and sympathy, his voice a low murmur, a somber drone. He read Robert's last wishes aloud, his voice steady and clear, cutting through the heavy silence, each word a hammer blow to my heart. It was simple, just as Robert had always been, straightforward and honest, without pretense. A few personal items to cherished friends, a generous donation to the local community center that Robert had tirelessly supported, and the rest, the business, the properties, the entire estate valued at over $10 million, was left to me, Eleanor Vance. David was named as the secondary beneficiary to inherit everything upon my death. My heart swelled with a bittersweet mix of love and responsibility, a heavy mantle to bear, a legacy to uphold. There was also a sealed letter for me, a final message from my beloved, a whisper from beyond the veil, a secret shared only between us. My hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as I opened it, the crisp paper rustling softly in the quiet room, a sound like dry leaves skittering across a barren landscape. Robert's familiar, strong handwriting filled the page, each stroke a tangible connection to him, a lifeline, a final embrace. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. "If you are reading this, my time has come. My only regret is leaving you alone. You were my rock, my partner in everything. Every dream we chased, every obstacle we overcame, we did it together, hand in hand, a true partnership. I leave it all to you because you built it with me. Every late night, every risk, every success, it was ours, a testament to our shared life, our unwavering bond, our enduring love. Be careful, my love. Trust your instincts. They have never failed you. The last line sent a chill down my spine, a cold premonition that snaked its way through my grief, a warning from the grave, a final act of protection. It felt less like a farewell and more like a call to arms, a final act of protection from beyond the grave, a silent plea to be vigilant. The air in the room seemed to thicken, heavy with unspoken implications, a silent alarm ringing in my ears, a sense of impending doom. Then, Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, a small, deliberate sound that broke the spell, and handed me a separate, thick folder. Its weight felt significant in my hands, a burden and a shield, a weapon forged in foresight. "Robert prepared this for you as well, Eleanor," he said, his gaze steady, almost knowing, as if he too had seen the shadows gathering, the storm on the horizon. "He said you would know what to do with it." Inside was a meticulously organized paper trail, a chilling narrative laid bare, page after page of undeniable truth, a testament to Robert's meticulous nature. Bank statements, emails, loan documents, all neatly categorized and dated, a testament to Robert's foresight, his unwavering commitment to justice. It showed, with undeniable clarity, that for the past 5 years, Robert had been quietly bailing David out of one financial disaster after another. Failed stock market gambles, a high-risk investment fund that Amelia had convinced him to join, personal loans he'd co-signed and been left to pay. It totaled nearly $2 million, a staggering sum that had been siphoned away, bit by bit, from Robert's hard-earned fortune, like a slow, silent bleed, a parasitic drain. I saw emails from David, first apologetic and desperate, pleading for help, then becoming more demanding, almost entitled, his words growing colder with each request, his true nature slowly revealing itself. I saw texts from Amelia, cold and calculating, outlining exactly how much they needed and when, her words devoid of any warmth or concern for Robert's health, a predator's precise demands, a puppeteer pulling the strings. It was a chronicle of deceit, a story of a son and his wife bleeding his father dry, all while pretending to be too busy to visit, too busy to care, too busy to acknowledge the man who had given them everything. The bitter taste of betrayal filled my mouth, a metallic tang that made my stomach churn, a wave of nausea washing over me, a physical manifestation of my emotional turmoil. Robert had known. He had seen the truth, and he had armed me with it, a shield against the coming storm, a beacon in the darkness. The rustle of papers in my hands felt like the whispers of a conspiracy, finally brought to light, a secret unveiled. 30 days later, it all made sense, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with a sickening finality, a grim mosaic of deception, a masterpiece of manipulation. David sat across from me in that lawyer's office, the same one where his father's will was read, the same polished mahogany table now feeling like a battleground, a silent arena where my fate would be decided. He had his own lawyer this time, a man named Mr. Sterling, whose slicked-back hair and condescending smile did nothing to inspire trust, only a deeper sense of unease, a feeling of dread. David was contesting the will. Not all of it, of course. That would be too obvious, too crude, too easily dismissed, a move that would expose his true intentions too soon. He was petitioning the court to have me declared mentally incompetent, to have him appointed as my legal guardian and the conservator of the estate. His lawyer, a master of manipulation, presented a dossier filled with evidence. "My recent episodes of confusion," he droned, referring to the times my grief had made me momentarily forget a name or misplace my keys, moments of human frailty twisted into damning proof, a cruel distortion of reality. My inability to manage my own finances, a blatant lie given my decades of experience managing not only our household but also assisting Robert with his business, a testament to my capabilities. My deep depression following Robert's death, a natural human response twisted into a pathological condition, a convenient excuse for their machinations, a weaponized grief. It was all there, every minor stumble, every moment of vulnerability, twisted and magnified, used as a weapon against me, a calculated assault on my character, a systematic attempt to dismantle my identity. He claimed his father had been covering for my declining mental state for years, and that leaving me in charge of the estate was a final, tragic mistake made by a man in denial, a man whose judgment was clouded by love, a convenient narrative for their greed. He was trying to erase me, to paint me as a confused old woman who needed saving, a burden to be managed, a relic to be set aside, a ghost in my own home. And as he laid out his case, my son, my David, looked at me with a chillingly calm expression, a look of pity that was the most profound betrayal of all. His eyes, once so full of innocent wonder, now held a cold, calculating glint, devoid of any warmth, any recognition of the mother who bore him. He wasn't just after the money. He was trying to steal my life, my memories, my very identity, to strip me of my dignity, to erase my existence, to make me a non-person. And I knew in that moment, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the man my husband had warned me about wasn't a stranger. He was my own flesh and blood, and he was coming for everything I had left, a wolf in sheep's clothing, a viper in my bosom. This was not just a legal battle. It was a fight for my very soul, for the right to define my own reality, to reclaim my narrative. The scent of stale coffee and old paper in the lawyer's office seemed to cling to me, a heavy shroud, a suffocating presence. The ticking of the wall clock was deafening, marking the slow, agonizing passage of time as my world fractured around me, threatening to swallow me whole. This was the beginning of the war, and I was ready to fight, armed with Robert's truth and my own unyielding spirit. The courtroom was a blur of hushed whispers and rustling papers, but all I could see was David's face, that calm, almost pitying expression, a mask of feigned innocence that made my stomach clench with a sickening mix of dread and fury. It was a mask, I realized, a carefully constructed facade he'd perfected over years, perhaps even decades, honing his deception like a sculptor chiseling stone. My mind raced back, trying to pinpoint the exact moment the cracks began to show, the subtle shifts in his character that I, blinded by a mother's fierce, unconditional love, had dismissed as youthful ambition or simply growing pains. I remembered a conversation with Robert years ago when David was just starting college, full of bright-eyed idealism, eager to conquer the world. Robert had been reviewing David's financial aid forms, a deep frown etched on his usually serene face, a furrow between his brows that spoke of concern. "He's claiming he needs more than he does, Eleanor," he'd said, his voice low, tinged with a disappointment that cut deeper than any anger. "He's inflating his expenses, padding the numbers, trying to get more than he's entitled to." I'd brushed it off, a dismissive wave of my hand, my heart unwilling to believe such a thing of my son. "Oh, Robert, he's just a kid, trying to make a little extra spending money for books or a date. We all did it, didn't we? A little harmless exaggeration?" Robert had just sighed, a deep, weary sound that now, in hindsight, felt like a premonition, a warning I had been too naive to heed. "It's not about the money, Eleanor. It's about the principle. It's about honesty. It's about starting off on the right foot, building a foundation of truth." I wish I had listened more closely then. Wish I had seen the tiny red flags waving in the wind, instead of dismissing them as mere trifles, as youthful indiscretions. The scent of old leather from Robert's armchair, where he sat that day, now brought a pang of regret so sharp it almost took my breath away, a ghost of a memory that haunted me. After that initial, gut-wrenching shock in the lawyer's office, a cold, unyielding resolve settled over me, hardening my heart against the pain, transforming my grief into a steely determination. I wasn't just fighting for my inheritance, for the tangible assets Robert had left behind. I was fighting for Robert's legacy, for the truth he held so dear, for the integrity he embodied, and for my own sanity, my right to define my reality, to not be erased by their lies. David's lawyer, Mr. Sterling, was a master of insinuation, a snake oil salesman in an expensive suit, his words dripping with false concern. He painted a picture of me as a recluse, a woman whose world had shrunk to the confines of her home after her husband's death, susceptible to delusions, easily swayed, a fragile mind teetering on the brink of senility. He brought up minor incidents, twisting them into grotesque caricatures of evidence of my supposed decline. The time I'd left the stove on for too long, a moment of absent-mindedness that any grieving person might experience, a fleeting lapse in concentration, became a sign of severe cognitive impairment, a precursor to dementia. My decision to donate some of Robert's old clothes to charity, a simple act of kindness and closure, a way to let go, was spun as an inability to manage his belongings, a sign of my detachment from reality, my inability to cope. Each accusation was a tiny needle, pricking at my composure, trying to unravel the fabric of my self-worth, to make me doubt myself, but I held firm. I had to. Robert's warning echoed in my ears, a mantra of strength. Trust your instincts. They have never failed you. His voice, deep and resonant, seemed to fill the courtroom, giving me courage, a silent strength that flowed through my veins. The fluorescent lights above hummed, casting a harsh, unforgiving glow on the proceedings, illuminating every flicker of emotion on the faces around me, every subtle shift in David's posture, every nervous glance Amelia cast his way. I felt the tremor in my hands, but I clasped them tightly in my lap, refusing to show any weakness. This was a performance, and I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I started digging, not just through Robert's meticulously organized files, his neat stacks of documents and ledgers, each one a testament to his methodical nature, but through my own memories, sifting through the years like an archaeologist unearthing ancient artifacts, searching for clues. I remembered David's lavish lifestyle, even when his supposed startup was struggling, a venture he vaguely described as disrupting the tech industry, a phrase that now sounded hollow and pretentious. The expensive cars, gleaming and new, parked ostentatiously in our driveway during his rare visits, a blatant display of wealth, the designer clothes, always impeccably tailored, that Amelia wore with an air of casual superiority, her eyes always assessing, always calculating, the exotic vacations they flaunted on social media, pictures of pristine beaches and five-star resorts, a life of luxury that seemed to defy their stated income. Where was the money coming from? Robert had always been discreet, a man who valued privacy above all else, who believed in quiet generosity. But now, looking back, I saw the pattern with chilling clarity. Every time David's finances seemed to hit a snag, every time a new opportunity arose that required significant capital, Robert would suddenly have a successful investment or a lucky break that allowed him to quietly transfer funds to David's account. It wasn't just the $2 million in documented loans. It was a constant, subtle drip of money, disguised as gifts or business opportunities, a financial IV keeping David's extravagant life support, a lifeline he had come to expect. Robert had been trying to protect David, to keep him afloat, to shield him from the consequences of his own recklessness. But in doing so, he had enabled him, unwittingly creating the very monster he feared, the very person who now sought to destroy me. And David, with Amelia's calculating influence, had learned to exploit his father's boundless generosity, seeing it not as love, but as a weakness to be leveraged, a resource to be drained. The bitter taste of realization filled my mouth, a metallic tang that made my stomach churn, a wave of nausea washing over me. The rustle of old papers in my hands felt like the whispers of 1,000 forgotten truths, finally coming to light, each document a piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. The most chilling discovery came from an old journal of Robert's, a small, leather-bound book with a worn cover, its pages brittle with age, its scent a mix of old paper and Robert's familiar pipe tobacco. He kept it hidden in his study, tucked away behind a row of legal tomes, a private sanctuary where he'd jot down thoughts, observations, and sometimes his deepest fears, the anxieties he couldn't share even with me, his closest confidant. I found an entry from 3 years ago, shortly after David and Amelia had asked for a significant sum for a supposed business venture that had evaporated into thin air, leaving a trail of debt. Robert had written, his elegant script now appearing almost frantic. The words pressed hard into the page. I fear I've created a monster. David's ambition has curdled into pure, unadulterated greed, a hunger that consumes everything in its path. Amelia is a dangerous influence, a siren luring him to financial ruin, her whispers poisoning his mind. She sees only dollar signs, a bottomless well of our family's wealth, and David, my son, is too weak, too easily swayed, to resist her. He is becoming a stranger to me, a shadow of the boy I once knew, a stranger I no longer recognize. I must protect Eleanor. But how do you protect someone from their own child, from the very blood that flows through their veins, from the one who should be their greatest comfort? The words were a punch to the gut, a physical blow that left me breathless, gasping for air, the room spinning around me. Robert had known. He had seen it all, the slow, agonizing erosion of his son's character, the manipulative dance of Amelia, pulling the strings from the shadows, orchestrating their downfall. And he had tried, in his own quiet, protective way, to warn me, to arm me for a battle he knew was inevitable, a battle I was now fighting alone. The ink on the page seemed to bleed into my fingertips, a tangible connection to his pain, his foresight, his desperate love. The silence of the study, usually so comforting, now felt heavy, oppressive, filled with the ghosts of unspoken fears, of a father's broken heart. I traced the lines of his handwriting, feeling the weight of his final message, a burden and a blessing. My lawyer, a sharp young woman named Sarah Chen, with eyes that missed nothing and a mind like a steel trap, was a godsend. She listened patiently as I recounted every memory, every suspicion, every tiny detail that had been gnawing at me, piecing together the fragments of my fractured reality. She saw the truth in my grief, not just the vulnerability, but the strength that lay beneath it, the unwavering resolve of a mother scorned, a woman fighting for her truth. "Eleanor," she said, her voice firm, cutting through my emotional turmoil, her words a balm to my wounded spirit. "Robert didn't just leave you in a state. He left you a weapon. This paper trail, his journal, it's all here. He knew this might happen, and he prepared you for it. He armed you for this fight." We began to build our defense, meticulously piecing together the evidence of David's financial impropriety, his long history of deception, and Amelia's calculated, insidious involvement. It was painful, like dissecting a deep, festering wound, each revelation a fresh cut, but necessary, a surgical precision required to expose the rot. Every document we uncovered, every email, every bank statement, painted a clearer, more damning picture of a son who saw his parents not as a source of love and guidance, but as a bottomless ATM, a resource to be drained dry, a means to an end. The smell of old paper and fresh ink filled Sarah's office, a scent that now symbolized justice, the promise of vindication. The clicking of her keyboard as she organized the files was a steady rhythm, a drumbeat of impending confrontation, a march towards truth. I felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark in the darkness, that perhaps, just perhaps, I could win this. One afternoon, while sorting through old photographs, a task that usually brought a gentle melancholy, a nostalgic warmth, I found a picture of David as a boy, no older than 5, sitting on Robert's lap. They were both laughing, their faces alight with pure, unadulterated joy, a moment frozen in time, a snapshot of innocence. A pang of longing, sharp and unexpected, pierced through me, a physical ache in my chest, a yearning for a past that was now irrevocably lost. Was that innocent, joyful boy still in there somewhere, buried beneath layers of greed and manipulation, a prisoner in his own skin? Or had he been completely consumed by the man he had become, a stranger wearing his face, a hollow shell? I looked at the picture, then at the stack of damning evidence on my desk. The stark contrast, a cruel mockery, a brutal juxtaposition of past and present. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was a betrayal of every memory, every shared laugh, every quiet moment of love, every foundation of trust we had built. It was a betrayal of the very essence of our family, a desecration of everything Robert and I had cherished, a tearing of the fabric of our lives. If you're feeling this knot in your stomach, this ache of recognition, this sense of profound disappointment from someone you once held dear, please share this story. Someone you know might need to hear it, might need to know they're not alone in their struggle against unseen enemies, against the wolves in sheep's clothing. The cold glass of the photo frame felt like ice against my fingertips, a stark contrast to the warmth of the memory it held, a chilling reminder of how much had changed. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure the scent of David's baby shampoo, the feel of his tiny hand in mine, but the images were fading, replaced by the cold reality of the present. The court hearing was set, the date looming like a dark cloud on the horizon. a storm gathering force. David and Mr. Sterling were confident, their arrogance palpable, their smugness radiating across the courtroom. They believed they had me cornered, a grieving widow easily dismissed, a relic of a bygone era, a woman whose voice no longer mattered. But they underestimated me. They underestimated Robert, whose foresight was now my shield, his love my armor. And they certainly underestimated the power of a mother's unwavering resolve, a force as old and as fierce as time itself, a primal instinct to protect what is hers. As I walked into the courtroom, my head held high, my spine straight, my gaze unwavering, I saw David and Amelia whispering, a smug, self-satisfied look on their faces, a conspiratorial glint in their eyes. They thought they had won. They thought they had me. But I had a secret weapon, a final piece of evidence that Robert had carefully orchestrated, a twist that would expose their greed and shatter their carefully constructed lies, leaving them exposed and vulnerable, their reputations in ruins. And as the judge called the court to order, his gavel striking the wood with a sharp, decisive crack that echoed through the silent room, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was not just about money. This was about justice. This was about truth. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my family's honor. And I was ready to fight for it, with every fiber of my being, no matter the cost, no matter the pain, no matter the emotional toll. The scent of polished wood and old paper filled the air, a scent that now felt like the prelude to battle, a call to arms. My heart hammered against my ribs, a war drum beating a steady rhythm of defiance, a testament to my unyielding spirit. This was my moment, and I would not falter. The courtroom lights, once harsh, now seemed to focus, illuminating the path ahead. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with a renewed sense of purpose. The fight was on. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation, a low murmur of voices that felt like a prelude to a storm, a gathering tempest of truth. Mr. Sterling, David's lawyer, had just finished his opening statement, a theatrical performance designed to paint me as a senile old woman, easily manipulated, a victim of my own fading faculties, a relic of a bygone era. He even shed a crocodile tear for David, the dutiful son, trying to protect his mother from herself, a performance so convincing it almost made me doubt my own resolve, almost made me question the clarity of my own mind. I watched David, sitting beside him, nodding solemnly, playing the part of the concerned child, his face a mask of feigned innocence, a chilling tableau of deception. My lawyer, Sarah Chen, stood up, her posture radiating quiet confidence, her eyes sharp and intelligent, scanning the room, taking in every detail, every nuance. "Your Honor, members of the jury," she began, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the lingering tension, a beacon of reason in the fog of lies. "The defense would have you believe that Eleanor Vance is a woman in decline, incapable of managing her own affairs. They would have you believe that her late husband, Robert Vance, a man of impeccable integrity, a pillar of this community, made a tragic mistake in leaving his entire estate to his wife. But the truth, as always, is far more complex and far more insidious than a simple narrative of a son's concern, a son's devotion." The scent of old paper and polished wood filled the air, a scent that now felt like the prelude to battle, a scent of impending justice. My heart, which had been a frantic bird trapped in my chest, now beat with a steady, determined rhythm. Sarah then systematically dismantled Mr. Sterling's narrative, brick by painstaking brick, revealing the crumbling foundation of their deceit. She presented the medical records, irrefutable proof of my mental acuity, my long history of managing Robert's personal finances, a testament to my competence and my active involvement in community organizations. Each piece of evidence a nail in the coffin of their lies, a testament to my vibrant life. She called witnesses, my doctor, my accountant, friends who testified to my sharp mind and unwavering resolve, their voices echoing with genuine affection and respect, painting a picture of a woman far from senile. Each testimony chipped away at the carefully constructed image David and his lawyer had tried to project, revealing the cracks beneath the surface, the rot within. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the moment of truth, the moment Robert had prepared me for. Sarah held up Robert's journal, its worn leather cover a silent testament to his foresight, his love, his unwavering belief in me. "This, Your Honor," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction, resonating through the silent courtroom, "is not just a personal diary. It is a chronicle of a father's heartbreak, a testament to his desperate attempts to save his son from a path of greed, and ultimately a warning, a final act of love, a final plea." She read excerpts, Robert's anguished words echoing through the silent courtroom, detailing David's escalating financial demands, Amelia's manipulative influence, and Robert's growing fear for my future, for my safety, for my very existence. David's calm facade began to crack, a tremor running through his carefully composed posture. He shifted in his seat, his eyes darting nervously, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple, betraying his inner turmoil. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of revelation, the undeniable truth hanging in the balance. I could almost hear Robert's voice, a gentle whisper of encouragement, urging me to stay strong. But the real blow, the one that shattered their carefully constructed world, that exposed the rotten core of their ambition, came when Sarah introduced the financial record, the meticulously organized paper trail Robert had left behind, a damning indictment of their avarice, a meticulous record of their betrayal. Bank statements, loan agreements, emails, and texts, all detailing the millions Robert had secretly paid to cover David's failed ventures and Amelia's extravagant lifestyle. She projected the emails onto a large screen, their cold, demanding words magnified for all to see, for all to judge. Amelia's tone, devoid of any warmth or concern, her blatant disregard for Robert's health, and her thinly veiled threats if her demands weren't met, were laid bare, a chilling portrait of a heartless manipulator. The jury gasped, a collective intake of breath that reverberated through the room, a wave of shock and disgust. David's face turned ashen, the color draining from his cheeks, leaving him looking hollow and defeated, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. Amelia, sitting in the gallery, looked like she wanted to disappear, to melt into the polished wood of the bench, to escape the harsh glare of the truth. Sarah concluded, her voice rising with righteous indignation, filling every corner of the courtroom. "This, ladies and gentlemen, is not a case of a son protecting his mother. This is a case of a son, aided and abetted by his wife, attempting to exploit his grieving mother for financial gain, just as he exploited his father for years. Robert Vance knew this day might come. He prepared for it, and he left his wife, Eleanor Vance, not just an inheritance, but the undeniable, irrefutable truth, a truth that speaks louder than any lie." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the faint clicking of the court reporter's machine, a mechanical rhythm marking the end of their charade. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, the crushing weight of disappointment from someone you loved, please comment below. Your stories matter, and sharing them can be a powerful step towards healing, towards finding your own voice in the aftermath of deceit. The cross-examination of David was brutal, a relentless dissection of his character and his lies, a surgical exposure of his deceit. Sarah cornered him, exposing his evasions, his complete lack of remorse, his carefully constructed narrative unraveling thread by thread, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. He tried to blame Amelia, then me, then even his deceased father, his voice growing increasingly desperate, his words tumbling out in a frantic, incoherent mess. But the evidence was overwhelming, a mountain of proof that crushed his every attempt at deflection. His carefully constructed image crumbled before the jury's eyes, revealing the hollow core beneath, the emptiness within. Amelia, called to the stand, fared no better. Her attempts to portray herself as a loving daughter-in-law, a concerned family member, were shattered by her own emails and texts, read aloud for all to hear, her own words condemning her, sealing her fate. The courtroom, once a stage for their deception, became the arena of their undoing, a place where their carefully guarded secrets were laid bare, exposed to the harsh light of justice. I watched them, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with a profound, aching sadness. The son I had raised, the boy I had loved, the child who once held my hand so trustingly, was gone, replaced by a stranger consumed by avarice, a ghost of a future that would never be. The weight of that realization was heavier than any anger could have been, a sorrow that settled deep in my bones. The air, once thick with tension, now felt heavy with the aftermath of shattered illusions, the bitter taste of a victory that felt more like a loss. The jury returned its verdict swiftly, a unanimous decision that echoed through the courtroom, a resounding affirmation of truth, in my favor. The judge dismissed David's petition, confirming my full control over Robert's estate, every last dollar and deed, every piece of property, every investment. David and Amelia left the courtroom in disgrace, their faces etched with defeat, their shoulders slumped, their carefully cultivated image in tatters, their dreams of ill-gotten gains reduced to ashes. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty, a strange, hollow ache in my chest, a void where a mother's love once resided. The victory was hollow, a Pyrrhic one. I had won the battle, but I had lost my son, perhaps forever, the chasm between us now too wide to bridge. In the days that followed, I began the slow, arduous process of rebuilding, not just my life, but my spirit. I honored Robert's legacy by establishing a foundation in his name, dedicated to supporting young entrepreneurs with integrity, something David had so clearly lacked, a way to turn our pain into purpose, our sorrow into strength. I spent time with friends, reconnected with distant relatives, and found solace in the quiet rhythm of my life, in the simple joys of gardening and reading, in the warmth of genuine human connection. The house, once filled with the echoes of grief and the shadow of betrayal, slowly began to feel like home again, filled with new memories, new laughter, a renewed sense of peace. The scent of fresh-baked bread, a comfort from my childhood, now filled the kitchen, a symbol of renewal, of hope reborn. One evening, as I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, a gentle breeze rustling through the leaves, carrying the scent of jasmine, my phone rang. It was David. I hadn't heard from him since the trial. Not a single word, not a whisper. His voice was small, broken, a stark contrast to the confident, almost arrogant tone he'd adopted in court. "Mom," he began, his voice barely a whisper, thick with unshed tears. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I'm so sorry." He spoke of Amelia leaving him, of losing his job, of the crushing weight of his actions, the consequences finally catching up to him, a heavy burden he now carried alone. He sounded genuinely remorseful, his words laced with a raw, unvarnished pain, a vulnerability I hadn't heard in years, but the trust, once shattered into a million pieces, was not easily mended. I listened, my heart aching with a complex mix of sorrow and a faint, flickering hope, a tiny ember in the darkness, but my resolve remained firm. "David," I said, my voice gentle but unwavering, a mother's voice, "your father and I gave you everything. We taught you right from wrong. We instilled in you the values of honesty and integrity. The choices you made were your own, and now you must live with them." I didn't hang up. I just listened, letting him speak, letting him unburden himself, letting the years of unspoken pain pour out, a torrent of regret. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning, a fragile thread of connection in the vast chasm that had opened between us, a tiny bridge across a gaping wound, a recognition that even in the deepest betrayals there can be a glimmer of hope for healing, for understanding, for a future, however uncertain, however distant. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn, painting the world in shades of twilight, I knew that my journey was far from over. It was a new chapter, one I would write on my own terms, guided by the wisdom of Robert's enduring love and the unyielding strength of my own spirit. Subscribe to my channel to follow my journey, to see how this story unfolds, and remember, sometimes the greatest strength comes not from avoiding pain, but from facing the hardest truths head-on, with courage and an open heart. This is Eleanor Vance, and this is my story. Thank you for listening, for bearing witness to my truth, for sharing this journey with me. My hand, once trembling, now felt steady, ready to write the next chapter.